Hello everyone, welcome to Anime No Mi, and thank you for joining us for another One Piece video. In today's video, we're going to talk about Shanks and a possible betrayal in the future. Now, we believe that Shanks has been an ally to Luffy since the very beginning of the story, but recently he did something very suspicious that may hint that in the future he could turn out to be a villain, and possibly even one of Luffy's most powerful enemies. There are several things that he says and several actions of Shanks that indicate that he may be on the side, or at least manipulating the world government, and the friendship between him and Luffy may be just a friendship of interests, as Shanks might be an ally of the Gorosei, or even have a mission of his own that is yet to be revealed. In today's video, we're going to focus on Shanks' real intentions of Luffy, or at least what they could be, at what time Shanks might have shown that he's really not Luffy's ally, and what his real goals might be in the allied. But before we dive into the video, if you're new to the channel, we'd be absolutely honored if you consider leaving us a like, or even subscribing with a comment letting us know what you thought in the comments. It really helps us out and motivates us to make more content. And if you want to help us out in a more substantial way, consider sharing the channel with your friends. But without further ado, let's get into the video. From the very moment we met Shanks in our story, he appeared to be an extremely relaxed man. Unlike other pirates who chose to live a life of purpose or treasure seeking, he really seems to only want to have fun with his friends and go on long adventures. And this is very different from the others that want to seek only treasure or fame or even conquest. In the past, we've always seen him treat Luffy well, and it seems they had a great friendship, for he even sacrificed his arm to save Luffy's life and bet the future on this young rubber lad. And on top of that, we also saw that Shanks gave Luffy his greatest treasure, the straw hat that he had gotten from his captain Goldie Roger, and which has become the iconic symbol of the Straw Hat crew. These acts showed that Shanks really had great confidence in Luffy for the future. We've also seen Shanks show himself to be a person who wants to seek out peace, or at least maintaining a certain balance, because we've seen that he prefers dialogue to entering into a direct fight without first trying to find some kind of peaceful resolution. And it's only when his opponent shows that they are not open to a peaceful resolution that Shanks does attack. Sacrificed his. The only times where we've really seen this more aggressive side of Shanks is when we've seen Luffy's life in danger. For instance, during the Battle of Marineford, when he showed up to stop the conflict and save Luffy, we saw that he was incredibly serious and would have jumped in had the fighting not stopped. And although he seems to care a lot about the people close to him, Shanks doesn't really seem to care what happens to him. Even though he's humiliated, he still remains calm, and it's only when his friends come into danger that his personality shifts. But usually when we see Shanks and his crew, they're almost always seen partying and drinking, and as if the captain's favorite pastime is just throwing banquets. But when we did see his moment of rage, it seemed like there might have been something extra to it, as if all his goals might depend on Luffy. As was noted by the Gorosei, Shanks is a peaceful person by nature and really doesn't seek to cause chaos and disorder like the other Yonko. He's generally against the idea of unnecessary battles, even if his honor's involved. But if you involve one of his friends, he'll step into the fight. Shanks also seemed to admire those who demonstrate courage, having protected and praised Kobe for gathering his courage and risking himself to stop the battle at Marineford. For the young sailor believed that it was useless to continue fighting in a battle that had already lost its meaning. I mean, only lives were being lost at that point. Shanks has proven to be quite influential as well, as shown when he suggested a ceasefire between the Whitebeard pirates and the Marines during Marineford. His skills in diplomacy were so great that he managed to convince Sengoku to agree to his proposal, despite the latter having a stronger anger towards the pirates. We've also seen during the reverie that Shanks just walked in to meet with the Gorosei and sat down in an armchair to just have a sit-down conversation. Now, at first, this kind of confused some One Piece fans. I mean, after all, the world government is an organization that punished pirates, so it was really unusual to see that the Gorosei just had a sit-down with Shanks. Now, even though the meeting was peaceful and Shanks really didn't want to cause any trouble, he still might have been considered an enemy, just like other pirates and Yonkos. I mean, he still remained a threat to the world government and the Marines just based on his enormous power and his crew, but they didn't seem to fight the latter having, so there would be no visible reason for the Gorosei to accept a meeting with Shanks, unless Shanks was momentarily an ally of the Gorosei, for he could have been manipulating the world government and also Luffy all along. After all, we know the world government was desperate to get their hands on the Sun God fruit and punished Who's Who for losing it. Likewise, we also know that Shanks knows that Luffy is the Gorosei's natural enemy, and yet he seems to help this group. But before we get into Shanks' possible goal, let's talk about previous events that may indicate that he was an ally of the world governments for a very long time, even before Luffy became a pirate. Now, we know when Luffy was small that he and Shanks formed a friendship, but the exact timing really isn't known, so it could be that Shanks himself initiated this friendship out of interest. After all, he might have noticed something something in Luffy, something that told him that he might be able to awaken the fruit of the sun god. We saw that Shanks even sacrificed his arm, and this may have been in order to move Luffy a little, in order to make sure that Luffy had a debt to him. After everything it took Shanks and his crew to defeat Cypherpole and get this power of this legendary devil fruit, he simply decides to put it in a trunk and get close to Luffy. We also know that somehow this fruit seems to have a will of its own, and by all indications, it may even choose its user, and that's why it hasn't awakened for so many years, that it was really waiting for someone who possessed the right requirements to wake it back up. So just as the highest ranking world nobles might have known about that fruit, possibly Shanks might have known too. And so he put himself in just the right place to make sure that Luffy could be the chosen one, because just as this fruit could choose its owner, the devil fruit might also be able to choose to drive away those who are not the chosen ones, or even influence what they do. So Shanks left this very valuable fruit just inside a box right next to Luffy. Now, whether this was to test him or not, to see if he was the chosen one or not, we don't know, but Luffy did end up eating the fruit. And Shanks didn't exactly ask Luffy to do it, he just let it happen. And when we saw Shanks' crew reaction, they were so terrified, because they knew that the fruit was important, because they had to go through a ton of stuff to get to it. They had to defeat CP0 after all. So the crew wouldn't have understood why that there was this really powerful fruit just sitting in a box next to a kid. And so maybe even Shanks' crewmates didn't understand if there was an extra goal laying in the shadows. But once Luffy had eaten the fruit and that whole situation resolved, Shanks just pretty much took off on another adventure with his crew. And while he was on this new adventure, he just waited for fate to take care of the rest. For that moment for Luffy to be able to control his powers, and waiting for that fated reunion with him. And in the meantime, Shanks would have probably been quite interested to know what the world government's reaction would have been when they learned that Luffy could have been really the chosen one, and that one day he would reawaken the sun god. But Shanks had to wait for that to happen, and possibly it could have been through stories with Roger or some secret that he shared that he knew that that day was soon to approach. After all, when we saw the news of what happened at Whole Cake between Luffy and Big Mom, Shanks said that the day of their reunion was soon approaching, and he also had to have known that Big Mom possessed a poneglyph. So perhaps during his early travels, Shanks had done a lot of research on the Gomu Gomu no Mi and knew about the relationship that this fruit had with the sun god Nika. And when he managed to find out the truth about this fruit, he saw Luffy and saw that the moment that he had learned about all those years ago from Roger. So with the plan that he'd laid out so many years ago, he would have waited to see Luffy again, where he could then pass on information about the true powers and mission that only the Straw Hats could accomplish. But seeing the signs approaching, that's why Shanks went to Mary Joie and talked to the Gorosei, and said that he needed to talk about a certain pirate, because in that moment he was referring to Luffy, because Shanks would have then passed on the identity of the one who had inherited the legendary fruit of the sun god, and that Luffy would soon awaken that and bring an end to the world government. Because it's very likely the Gorosei didn't believe that Luffy was able to awaken the legendary devil fruit. After all, most of its history has been lost over time, and with the Gorosei changing the name of the fruit, they may not even know the whole story about the Void Century, or even about the Straw Hat. Only Im-sama seems to know about that. And at this point, Luffy could not be a complete unknown to the Gorosei. I mean, just consider what Luffy did in Marineford and having almost saved Ace. And even with all this information, they didn't even realize that the power Luffy possessed was the very one of the legendary fruit. It was only after Shanks went to talk to them that they understood who Luffy was and what could be awakened. So there is a possibility that Shanks for some reason has allied himself with the Gorosei, or if he has some kind of unknown connection with them. After all, he could be planning something that would involve the sun god's chosen pirate and the sun god's enemies, the celestial dragons. So in order for Shanks to accomplish this goal, he may have allied himself with the Gorosei because they would be the only ones capable of accomplishing it. But not specifically the Gorosei, but Im-sama. Because if Shanks really knows about what's going on inside the world government, it's possible that he also knows about the existence of the one who really commands the world government. And furthermore, it's possible that Shanks is one of the only people that knows about Im-sama's existence outside of the Gorosei, and he may have had the opportunity to have seen the real identity of this mysterious person. Or maybe he pretends not to know the truth in order to manipulate Im-sama indirectly. So Shanks may not in fact be the ally that Luffy thinks he is. He may just be using the friendship he made all those years ago to accomplish a specific goal. Or perhaps he is Luffy's real friend, but he believes that the mission Roger left him is so much bigger than any one person, and for that reason he can't tell him the whole truth, and may have even gone as far as to sacrifice himself to protect Luffy, just so everything could happen as he planned. But for now, just like Shanks, we're gonna have to wait until the two have their great reunion. And then perhaps we may get to see Shanks' real intention and reveal what all of this is in the real mission that Roger did not fulfill, and ultimately the thing that made Shanks cry. But now, we'd like to know what you think about it. What do you think about our idea? Do you think there is something that Shanks knows about the Gorosei that nobody else knows? Does he know about Im-sama, and could he have engineered this whole plan to carry out Roger's will? Let us know what you think in the comments below. So as we wrap up today's video, we want to thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end. Make sure you comment on any themes or ideas that you'd like to see in future videos. And also, since you've made it this far, give us a like as you head out to take on the rest of your day. Hope to see you all in our next video, and let's keep sailing this giant sea together. Take care.